Hello everybody, it's Claire here from Sewn by Claire, and it's a very sunny Spain at the moment. We're in the middle of summer, it's July now, and it's definitely hotting up with the temperatures. So I've got my newest make on, which is my Marcel dress by Chalk and Notch Patterns, and I'm really pleased with it. It's perfect for in this hot weather, nice and soft and floaty, but also it's very comfy to wear, which is always a good thing. I did think that it actually looked a little bit like the summer dress. Summer festival dress that Luna has, so I thought that might be of interest to some of you as well. Today is a bit of a different tutorial. I'm going to do a little bit of waffle first, and I hope you'll bear with me. But the reason for that is that I'm hoping to get my subscriber number up. It's going to be my birthday in about a month's time, and I just wondered whether there was a chance I could just hit the 1,000 subscriber mark in time for my birthday, which would be absolutely thrilling if I could. So I'm going to ask you for your help to do that. I've looked at the statistics the other day, and apparently about 75% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribers. So I just wondered whether or not I could ask you that if you have watched one or more of my videos and if you've enjoyed them, then if you wouldn't mind, I'd love it if you would just click on the subscribe button for me. It doesn't cost anything. I know when you feel like you've got to sign up to a subscription, it feels like it's going to cost you money, but it doesn't cost anything at all. What it does is just let me know that you're there, and that people are watching and enjoying what I make and put out there. And it does give you a real bit of motivation just to go to the trouble of making the videos. So I hope that's not too much to ask. There's a little red button just by the side on my channel, and also I think there should be a button on the video somewhere as well where you can click on the subscribe button. But if you can just click on there, if it's already greyed out and says subscribed, then you're already a subscriber, and thank you so much for that, because I really appreciate you being here. Please take the time to comment. I do answer every single comment at the moment. This is in July 2022, just in case the videos are still out there in 5 years' time, who knows. So I do try and answer all of the comments that people leave for me, because if you take the time to leave me a comment, then I'm going to take the time to reply and say thank you very much. So hopefully that is also something that you want to do, and just engage and just say hi to me. Perhaps let me know where in the world you are, and what your lunar journey has been like, if it's the lunar patterns that you're here for. The one that hopefully the sweetener that I've got, and I hopefully it's not considered a bribe. Honestly, it's really not. But if the little sweetener I've got is that I have put together a little pattern for. I can't say it's a lunar pattern because it's not endorsed by Sarah Peel and the Cool Crafting Gang, but it is one that I just drafted for my character, and I thought that it might be useful to somebody else if you don't know how to draft patterns. I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've used a few, so I've got some tips, and I knew kind of what I was doing a little bit. But let me just get Luna for you, and I can show you what we've made. So I've actually made a little head wrap for Luna. So it looks fairly ordinary from the front here with a little tie knot, but as you turn round, then you can see that it goes down the back of her head and just covers up the back of her head there, and then just comes round again, and then this knot sits really nicely just between her ears. It's fully removable. It just pulls off. Oh, just pulls off, she says. So it just pulls off like that. So little hands, if you tie the knot, if you've got little hands that are playing with your Luna, you can just leave it like that, and you can they can just pop it on and just put it into place. So I hope you like it. I thought it would go really sweetly with the apple picker outfit as well. It's got a bit of a land girl look to it, I thought. Anyway, it's just a little something I've put together. It's a really quick and easy. So if you've not followed any of my other tutorials before and you fancied having a little go at something, then this is the perfect little pattern just to have a go at. Luna's very happy with it. It matches her pink gingham shirt that we made the other day. That video is already up on my channel for Alfie's shirt, and then also her dungarees that she's got on. So barring some shoes, I mean, she's got her ballet slippers on at the moment, but barring a tutorial for doing the shoes, which obviously I'll get round to at some stage, then that's a complete outfit for Luna, isn't it, really? Or for Alfie. The dungarees and the shirt. We might want to make a flat cap. I know there is a flat cap pattern already that Sarah's made, but as far as I'm aware, and I have had a quick look on Google and also on the Cool Crafting website, there isn't a pattern for the head wrap, so I don't think I'm treading on any toes. I did send a message to the Cool Crafting gang via Grace, but they've not replied, and they're moving shop at the moment, so I think they've got their mind on other things, which is totally understandable. So I'm putting this video up now. If I've breached any rules, or if Sarah or Grace or any of the Cool Crafting gang aren't happy with what I've done, I will be taking it down again, and I'll put a little video up to say that I've had to take it down, which then you'd all know. But yeah, if you don't mind subscribing, and then in return, what I've done is I have put together a sheet with a pattern for the head wrap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this pattern into the description below, and you can print it out. I've tried to keep it in black and white. I've tried to keep off all the pictures and logos and making it all fancy, because I thought, well, that's just going to take up more ink, and I just wanted the instructions so you got that for future reference, and the pattern so that you can do that. There's also a square so you can check that it's the right size. So I've tried to cover everything off. And we're going to work with this today and put together a new head wrap for our Luna. And that way then I can show you how it's made. It's really quick and simple. It's going to be hopefully a lovely one, and I hope it's going to be really popular. If you do have friends who want the pattern, rather than just give it to them, I'd be really grateful if you just ask them to pop along, and if they just subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. But there is no requirement to be a subscriber in order to download the pattern. I can't control that. So anybody who has it, I hope you like it and enjoy it. But if you could just direct people back to my channel or give me credit for it, then I'd be really, really grateful. Thank you. Because again, I'm just trying to get my subscribers up. If I'm over 1,000 subscribers, and this is 5 years on, and by the time you watch this, or 10 years or whenever, then, and you see that I'm over 1,000 subscribers, and you feel like you're happy to subscribe, please go ahead and do so, because the more the merrier. I'd really like to create a bit of a community really with it all, where we're all supporters of Luna for this outfit. But also my other plans are that I want to make some children's clothes as well, and what I would like to try and do is match them as much as I can do to similar garments for the characters for Luna and her friends, because I think that there's going to be a real cuteness advantage of having children or our loved ones in the Luna inspired outfits, and then Luna having or one of the characters having the same outfit in theirs. And actually, if I can find, like this dress here, where I found that I've got a children's pattern in mind similar to this one as well, which is a free one on another channel, on another pattern site, not YouTube channel. So I'm going to do a tutorial on that as well. So then there could be the mummy, the child, and then the Luna all matching as well. I know that's a bit twee perhaps, and maybe it's a bit too much for some people, but there's something in my brain that finds that quite good fun really. And I've said before on a lot of my videos that I try and teach you or show you, help you understand that if you can make the Luna clothes, then you can make adult or children's clothes as well very easily, because all of the skills that you're learning are totally transferable. So with all of that said, I know that's a bit of a long intro. I know I talk a lot anyway, but hopefully you'll bear with me. And if you do choose to press the subscribe button, then thank you very much. I'm very grateful. The other thing that I just wanted to mention just before I do go is I want to do a very special shout out to one of my subscribers called Julianne. And Julianne contacted me after following the Luna videos and said how helpful she'd found them, and I was thrilled. But she then went on to say that she wanted to give me a little tip. So she offered to buy me a coffee or something like that, or a little bit something towards something. So I have set up a coffee account, which is KO-FI, and it's just a way that you can use to safely pass on a little tip or buy me a coffee, to say thank you for the videos. Again, absolutely no requirement whatsoever, and it was a lovely gesture and thought, and my very first one from Julianne from doing these videos. So I'm absolutely thrilled, and she absolutely made my day. So that was fantastic. But as I say, there's no requirement for that at all. I just thought if anybody else was thinking or had asked, then I would direct you to it, and that's all you'll find. I don't put it on all of my videos. If you look on the where there's the main homepage for my channel, then there's some little tabs, and one of them's says about, and if you click on there, then there's a link to the coffee account there. So I'm not going to be bombarding you, I'm not asking you to pay me or anything like that. I do all of this for fun and just for my pleasure and enjoyment, and hopefully you enjoy it too, and also to leave a bit of a legacy to maybe my children, my grandchildren in the future. If they ever decide they want to start sewing, then they can either learn from these videos if I'm not around in person, and so I just thought it would just be a nice thing to do. So again, massive thank you to Julianne, and I really appreciated your kindness, and I'm so pleased that you found the videos helpful on your Luna journey. Okay, I've finished. Let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is to just have a look in the description below and download the pattern. Print it at 100%, so the correct size, and when you've printed it off, just get a tape measure, or let me find my seam gauge here, and just measure up the 1 inch square to make sure that that measures both directions, and then you'll know that the pattern is the right size for how I intended it to be. So once you've done that, then you can take your scissors, and I want you to cut around the solid line, okay, all the way around there, and you'll end up with something that resembles this. This is my testing one that I used first off. So it's a little bit rougher than yours is, but it matches perfectly onto the pattern, so I know it's the same one. So once you've done that, I want you to then take your fabric, and I've got a piece of green gingham here that I'm going to use for this head wrap that I'm going to do next. And what you need to do is you need to cut 2 of these out. So the best thing to do is, if you fold your fabric in half, make sure that your pattern piece will fit on. Save as much fabric as you can. As you know, I like to try and save fabric. So there we go, we've got our pattern onto our piece of fabric like that. And then we're going to just put some pins through and cut it out, just as you would do any other pattern. So I'm going to get on and do that, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so once we've got our pattern cut out, and we've got our 2 pieces here, lie them on top of each other so that they're perfectly aligned, and we're going to mark these 2 little notches here. Now I've left these notches on this side deliberately, because you could say, why didn't I put it down here or down here? But this bit here is going to be hidden when you tie the knot. So if for some reason it's a little bit messy, because we're going to tuck those edges in when we top stitch it, then if that's messy for any reason, you're not going to see it, because once those ties are tied, it'll be hidden. And if it was down here, so if it was down here on the back here where it was a little bit untidy, you would then be able to notice, and so we don't want you to be able to see that. So that's why I've put it on that edge there. We've tried to avoid a curve, and then the next thing that you need to do is to take your scissors. So just pop your pattern piece back on top, and we're just going to mark our notches. So when we do a notch, we're just going to cut into the edge of the fabric. If you need to put a pin on, just put a pin on it just to hold it steady. About 1/8 of an inch, only a little bit, just to give us an indication that that's where we're going to leave it open. Okay, so hopefully you can see now that on both my pieces of fabric, I've got that little cut there that just shows you that we've got those notches. It just tells you what to do. Same with dressmaking patterns, that's exactly what we do on a dressmaking pattern. Then what I'm going to do is just take a couple of pins just to hold these sides together so they don't shift while we're working with them. If you wanted to, you could also use binding clips, which are these little clips here for holding fabric together. They're very useful as well, and you can just pop those around the edge, especially if you're sewing with little ones. If you've got a little one that you're making this head wrap with, then clips are ideal, because they don't prick your fingers, which can put some children off. So we've got our little notches here. So for me, I'm going to put 1 pin just at right angles to the notch just there, and this one here just here, because even I forget sometimes to leave that gap open. So I know that I'm going to start here and sew all the way around the edge when those are together, all the way around the edge, and come back to here. And I'm going to start and stop, back tack, start and stop at each point, and then you'll be able to use this then to turn your head wrap out. So let me just get my sewing machine set up, and we'll be ready to sew. So I've got my machine set up now with a coordinating thread. I'm using this dark green because I'm hopeful that the stitches then will show up for you. You can see what I'm doing. So you can either use a blending coloured thread, or you can use a contrast. I would suggest that if you're new to top stitching, that you use something that blends quite nicely, because then it's not going to be so noticeable if you do go a little bit wavy. I'm going to show you my tips that I use to keep me straight and to make sure that the stitches lie flat and nice and even. But if you're new and you've not had a lot of practice with top stitching, then it is something that it's a skill that develops in time. So just be gentle with yourself and just don't use a bright red thread or a black thread on a white fabric, for example. Just use something where you're not going to notice it quite so much. That would be a top tip just to start you off. So I'm using my ordinary presser foot, and I'm just going to sew in about 1/4 of an inch. Now I know that if I use the edge of my presser foot on the outside edge here, and I move my needle, because on my machine I can move my needle across, and I set it up at 5, that's 5.5, at 5, then generally speaking that's 1/4 of an inch. Now if you want to measure, all you do is get a measuring gauge or a seam gauge and pop it behind your needle just with your finger. Make sure your foot's nowhere near your foot pedal while you're messing about with your needle, or your machine's off, whichever, but if you're going to adjust your needle you're going to need it on. And if you just pop your seam gauge up against your needle, then that'll just hold it steady, and then you can see the marks on there. So I'm about 6mm there, so I'm just going to move it across a little bit more, and that will then give me to the end of my presser foot here on the side here, will give me my 1/4 of an inch. So again, it's just setting us up, because it's just important to be consistent, because if you suddenly take 1 centimetre of seam allowance, then that's going to make the head wrap come out much smaller when you turn it round. So by using the seam allowance that I've suggested, which is 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 of a centimetre or 6mm, then that will then give you the best chance to give it the same size that it fitted on my character. Bearing in mind that your character might not have the same size head as mine, because mine's been machine sewn, not felt, and also it depends on how well you stuff it as well, because I like mine quite firm. So again, you might want to make a prototype of your head wrap first in a insignificant fabric, just an old sheet or something, an old pillowcase, just to have a practice. You can practice the skill, and then also it means that when you do cut it out of your final fabric, you've then got you know that it's going to be the right size if you use the same seam allowance. Okay, so that's that bit. So for now, what we're going to do is going to use a couple of features on our sewing machine. So I'm going to match the edge of my presser foot up with the edge of my fabric. I'm going to hold on to my threads at the back here so they don't get knotted underneath, and then I've got a needle up, needle down button, and all that means is that whenever I stop sewing, my needle will always be in my work. The other thing that you can do is use the hand crank on your machine and just twist the hand wheel at the edge. So let me just show you this hand wheel just at the side here. Okay. And that will then mean that you can always just, before you do anything to adjust your work, always make sure that your needle is down into your work, because we're going to use a technique here called pivoting, and it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. All it means is that when you've got your needle in the work, into your fabric, if you then decide to lift your presser footer up, which is this bit that holds the fabric still while you're sewing, it means that you're not going to get a little jog in your stitches, because your needle is anchoring your needle down, your fabric down. Let me show you. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. So for here, I'm just going to drop my needle down into my work and do a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to reverse as well, just to do those couple of back tacks, just to keep those stitches straight. This is where I'm going to now activate my needle down. So I'm going to press my needle down button, and that's popped my needle down into the work. We don't need that pin, it's finished with now. But as you can see now, I can lift up my presser foot and I can pivot my work, and that's not going anywhere. So that's all nice and securely anchored down for me. And because we're going around these curves, we've got to take our time. So if you've got a speed dial, turn that down as well. So again, we don't go racing off to the edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to just gradually turn this piece of fabric as we go around the edges. It sounds complicated. Once you've got the hang of it, it's really easy, but it's a really good skill to master. So we've started off with that, with what we're doing. So let's just carry on. And as you'll see, my needle now, whenever I take my foot off my presser foot, will always stop in my work. We can see the fabrics bunching up slightly, and we want it to lie flat. But if you watch what happens when I lift my presser foot up, can you see all that tension and that fabric drop away? And that's what we want. We want to just take it nice and steady around these corners. And we're going to just keep lifting our presser foot up, releasing the tension of the fabric, making sure the fabric's nice and flat. And that stops us from getting any puckers in our work as well when we're sewing. So again, this is really, really straightforward. And we're just going to keep keeping the fabric up against the edge here. And it's starting to bunch up again. So I'm going to lift my presser foot up and just adjust my work. Nice and steady. Foot in there because we're going to just change direction, and just even just loosening the pressure off. You don't have to take it all the way up all the time. Just lift it slightly and it'll just release that pressure on your fabric, because your sewing machine can only sew in a straight line. So we've got to get used to manipulating the fabric underneath in order that we can then sew what we need to sew. Let's make sure I don't get too close to the edge, otherwise we'll lose some stitches. And we're just going to do, even if we just do one stitch at a time and then do an adjustment, you'll be surprised how much difference that makes. And some bits you'll be able to sew quite easily and smoothly, and other little bits you'll need to do a bit more manipulation for. So we're just guiding the fabric through the work. Here I can see I'm going off slightly, so I'm going to just lift up my presser foot and adjust that fabric so that the next bit is straight. And you're just looking at the next inch or so in front of your presser foot, because that's all you can kind of control at one time. Keep my hands out the way so hopefully you can see. Now we're coming up to the point here, which is the end of the tie, and what we're going to do is we're going to get up towards the top, but then I'm going to do one stitch at across the corner, because we'll never get this point turned out completely and without having too much bulk in it. And I've found that having one little stitch going straight across does help. So let me show you how we do that. So we're going to carry on straight up to the corner here, and when we feel we're about 1/4 inch away from the edge, don't want to lose too much of that, we're just going to take our presser foot up, turn the work so that it's straight across, and just one stitch. That's all we're doing. And then we're lifting the presser foot up again, and now we're going to come down the other side. And this pin's done its job now, so I'm going to take that one out so it doesn't interfere with what I'm doing. So just again, just lift that foot up and get rid of that tension. Just follow the curve of it and remove this little clip here, so you see they're quite handy. And what we're looking for, but when we're starting to turn, is if I use my seam gauge here, then we're looking for the fabric to be straight across from the needle. It doesn't matter where this is here, this end of the presser foot is here, it's directly across from the needle that's the really important bit. So that's where you're trying to keep your eye to make sure that the fabric is straight to that part. We do need to see what's coming ahead. It's a bit like driving, isn't it? You need to look for hazards ahead, but you just need to make sure that you've got your 1/4 inch at that point there. Obviously at 1/4 inch you've got a little bit of room for manoeuvre as well, so that does help. Go a little bit close at this edge. And if you feel like you're too close, you can just go back before you turn it out and just go over that seam and just correct it. The only things we can't correct is once you've cut something off. That's the only thing that we can't correct. Everything else we can unpick, or we can manage. So again, we're just starting to go around the corner here. So just start to move my presser foot just to accommodate for that curve. Release the tension underneath. And it might feel like a little bit of a slow process, but there's not a lot of stitching to do. So once we've got it sorted. But this is really good for doing curves on necklines as well. If if you're doing any dressmaking or anything like that, or you're doing a plique as well for quilting or for anything decorative, then again pivoting is a really useful skill to master. I'm just going to take this pin out and pop it in the other way so that it's not in my way for sewing around. Oh, light's gone. Must have a cloud. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did on the other tie top. We're going to go towards the top, quite close towards the top, perhaps a little bit closer than I intended, but one stitch across, and then we're going to come down the other side. So this pin here has done its job, so let's take that out. So only lift your foot once your needle is in your work. I'll take this little pin out before we get to it because I can see where the notch is. And I'm just going to reverse for a couple of stitches just to anchor that into there. Okay, so take our needle up, I'll take our fabric out of our work, and there we are. So we can hopefully see that I've left this little gap here, and we've got our seam allowance all the way around the edge there. Okay, so let's get on to the next stage. So now what I've got is I've got a pair of pinking shears. I don't know whether you've seen these before or not, but they've got these triangular cutouts, and what they do is they cut out little notches in the fabric, which then means that we can have a smoother curve when we turn things round. You'll know that I'm a fan of using these, and I use them on my characters around the ears here just to take out some of the bulk in that seam, because when you're trying to turn that round and want it to sit flat, then you need to have that seam nice and straight. The same thing on the curves of the face as well, and the back of the head. They're a really good tool. If you haven't got those, don't worry, you don't need to have those. You can also use a pair of snips or a pair of scissors. And so let me show you first with the pinking shears what we're going to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to, ignoring this little gap that we've got, let's just take those threads off. We don't need to have those hanging around. Okay. So what we need to do now is we're going to just trim off these edges. Now we're just taking off just the bare minimum that we can get away with that will allow us to have this little notch here. So if I just take off that, you'll see from the scraps here that I'm taking off, it's a minimal amount that I'm taking off. Okay. So let's do this ear like this. So on the top of the ear, we're just going to go straight across, because we just want to take that out, and literally just taking the edges off here so that you end up with something that looks like that. If you haven't got pinking shears, you're going to use snips or scissors, and you're going to make little cuts up to but not through your stitch line, and they need to be at right angles with your stitching line, like that. If I open that out, hopefully you can see that there's little snips through there, look. And what that does is it just lets that fabric just bend, whether it's in or whether it needs to fold over itself to lie flat. Again, depending on the size of the curve, these are quite tight curves, so again you can just snip through and carry on all the way around where it is snipped. The straighter the edges, the less close together your snips need to be. So here I'd probably go about that much apart. It's about 1 centimetre, isn't it, each time? But here I'm going across every like 3 or 4 millimetres, because that needs to fold back on itself and to lie flat. So just take that up to where I was. Okay, and I'm going to use my pinking shears because I think it's actually quicker for you on video. But if you haven't got them, like I say, you don't have to. Just be careful not to go to a bit gung-ho because you will cut through your seam. If you do cut through your seam, just put your work back in your machine again and just sew over that section again just to secure those threads, because that will then make sure that you're not going to make anything fray, especially if it's being played with by little hands. If it's sitting on a shelf, you might not have too many problems, but just watch out on your curves. I don't want to lose any of the tie that we've so lovingly sewn. And then I'm going to go up to as far as where the gap is. I'm not going to cut this gap here. So up to where that snip is, and we're back to the beginning again here. I'll just do one more just there. Okay, so as you can see from my scraps, there's not a lot being cut off there at all, so you don't need to, don't go crazy. And then what I suggest you do is I suggest you press it flat first before we do anything else. So we just take it to the ironing board and press it flat. I've got an iron next to me, so I'll just do that and then we'll be back. We do quite a bit of pressing in sewing, don't we, in home sewing, and just in case you weren't aware, that's just because it actually flattens the stitches and just makes them less bumpy. It just kind of sets them into your work. It does make it much smoother then for trying to turn things out. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to turn through the head wrap the right way around using this gap that we've left here. So if you pull the two sides apart first, oops, if I can get it. So just kind of bag it out that way. And then you're going to then just using your fingers, just tuck the start of it up towards the top of this tie here. I nearly said ear then, but it's not an ear, is it? And then I've got a knitting needle here. It's a wooden one, but you could use a chopstick if you wanted. Or if you've got a turning tool, you can use a turning tool. And then we're just going to ease that fabric up gently until it starts to pop out of this little hole just here that we've left. Once we've got hold of that, we can again then give it a little pull. This is probably the fiddliest bit of the whole thing, but then if you're used to making loonas, you're used to a little bit of fiddle, aren't you? Because they're such tiny things. It will go through comfortably depending on how thick your fabric is. So this is a 100% cotton gingham that I'm using. If you were using a wool for some reason or a corduroy for some reason, you might find that the gap on the pattern here might be a little bit narrow. Just use a slightly less seam allowance, or just make the pattern slightly wider at that point before you cut it out, and then you'll be able to sort it through quite easily. So again, I'm going to ease this through, peel this back. Once you get it started, it's easy. That was the most difficult bit to do. And then we're just going to use our fingers to reach inside and just pull through on the fabric that from the inside. You can see this this tie starting to disappear inside. Now I tend to start with this bit because I think it's easier to turn this bit first. So again, just opening it up the hole and just reaching inside. You can also use the knitting needle. Just be careful of using the point of a knitting needle. I'm using the blunt end, but we don't want to go and pierce a hole in the head wrap. Then we can just coax this out. If you can't do that, just get a pin and then just stick a pin in through the fabric, and you'll just be able to ease out a few millimetres at a time. Make sure you're just going through the fabrics. Don't pull too hard, otherwise you could pull some of your threads out. But as you can see, that's just starting to ease that through. I'm sure you've turned things out before, so you'll be familiar that you've got to be careful with these things. What we don't want it to flick like that, because if it's on a seam, sometimes it flicks out some fibres with it. So I want to be careful. Just talk amongst yourselves whilst you're just doing this. It could be worth the effort when we get there, but also it's good to see how long things take in real time as well. I think sometimes when we're just seeing something that's just flicks from one stage to the other, we don't always see how much care has been taken, and we think everything has to be done at top speed, and actually it doesn't. So again, I'm going to just gently ease out this bit until we get to that stitch that we did across the top, if you remember, just to make everything sit nice and still and steady until you think you can go no further. And then we're going to do this, just turn this one round, so you can just turn it back on itself like that. Tuck it inside. This is why we needed the reinforcing stitches, the back stitching at the start and stop of our sewing, just so that it would then allow us just to put a little bit of pressure on there while we're just pulling the fabric through. So again, take your time with if you're doing it this way with the pin, because you will pull fibres out. Well, it's easy too, because I have done it myself before. You don't want a fluffy head wrap unless that's the look you're going for. I suppose you could lose it, leave it as a raw edges, couldn't you, if you wanted? But anyway, so we're nearly there now. And then what I'm going to do then is use the edge of the knitting needle, and we're going to just put a little bit of pressure on the sewn line from the inside, and you'll be surprised how much better that makes your shape that you're turning. So again, you can do that on a neckline or on a pocket. You can do it as well if you're turning pockets and things around. So again, we're going right up to the top of that tie just to make sure that it's nice and got all its shape. Okay, we'll flatten that off with our fingers. And this is what we're left with at the moment. So we're now going to take our knitting needle. I'm going to take the point end this time, and then we're just going to just gently ease that along the edge of the sewn line like this, and it just puffs out those edges. You can just hold it with your fingers afterwards, and that will just finger press it. And again, just here. And you can also just, because we want that stitching edge to be right on the edge of our wrap of the hem. So again, you can just roll it with between your fingers, and that will get the stitches to the edge. And you might ask, why are we taking the time? Why don't we just bang it on the sewing machine and sew round again? But it's all about getting the very best finish that we can. If you've taken the time to sew this, then I want to show you how we can make it as best as possible, the very best it can be. So again, just pushing those seams out, just helps to get the shape right as well. And then once you've done that, what we're going to do is just pay attention now to the gap where we turned it through, and can you see here, we've got those two raw edges. What we're going to do is just tuck those in so that they're level with the edge of where we were, where we've turned it through, and the shape that we've now got. So it's only a small hem, like that. Make sure your little frame bits are inside, and then when we press that, that should hold that still for us. Just make sure you've got out to the right to the edge of your stitches. Oops, doesn't want to behave for me. There we go. Okay, and we're going to just press this flat again. So let me press this again, and you'll see how it looks then. So I've just pressed this again. You can see how nice and flat it's all lying, and you can also, it's difficult to tell where the actual opening is on the side. It is actually on this side here where it's still open, look. But yeah, when you just look at it straight on, it can be quite difficult to tell. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start and stop around the same place we were, because again, I want to hide that start and stop in the knot when we tie it. So we're going to start about here, and then just about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, we're just going to top stitch this all the way around. So again, we're going to use that pivot method that we did, where we put our needle into our work and to hold it still, so that when we lift the presser foot, just to adjust it slightly for going around the curves, then that's just going to keep it nice and neat for us, and we're not going to get a jagged stitch somewhere because we've taken our foot up without our needle in the work. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to just go over the stitches to start and stop as we would do, and we're nearly there, folks, nearly finished. Okay, so let me get my sewing machine and we'll get that top stitching done. So same setup as before. I put my foot down into the on my work to anchor it down. I'm going to put my needle down into the work, and that's going to anchor that now. So I can now lift my foot up, and that's not going anywhere. As you can see, it's completely held in place. A couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back. Always hold on to your threads just so you don't get a nest at the end, at the start and finish of your work. You only need a couple of stitches, that's all you need, and then I'm just going to turn my speed up a little bit, but if you're new to top stitching, then just take it nice and steady. Now let's just we're going to go off the edge if we're not careful. So again, let's lift our presser foot up and just start to move around. So it's more difficult to do this on camera. Again, this is where your blending thread or coordinating thread will be better for you. Just take it, I'm just looking in the little gap in my presser foot, and I can see the edges. So I'm just trying not to go too close to the edge, although I'm closer than I perhaps would like to be. You can also increase your stitch length if you want to. If we're sewing children's clothes or adults' clothes, then we'll often increase the stitch length for a top stitch. Oops. Just to show you, it doesn't matter how big or how clever you are, sometimes you have to use your unpicker. So I'm just unpicking the stitches back because I've gone too close here to the edge, and I'm not happy with that. I'm certainly not happy to showing that on camera for ages to come. So I'm just going to unpick these stitches. If you get to a point where you're happy with where you've sewn and it's just a few stitches that have gone wrong, just unpick them like this, leave as long a tail as you can, and then use a hand sewing needle to just bury the edges into your work. You can do a couple of knots in the thread first if you want to, but I'm just going to unpick this because I'm not happy with it, and then I will show you again how to do it properly this time. That would be good, wouldn't it? So I've changed the camera angle, let's try again. Let's use that needle down in the work, just pivot just slightly. And this time, because we're not going to be turning these ears out, we're going to stop in a point at the top. And then we're going to spin it all the way around, so we're not doing that one stitch across the edge. That was only for turning it out. If your work starts to get a little bit stuck as you're trying to turn things, you can use something like this called an awl, not to be used with children obviously, but then if you're very careful, you can then help your fabric along a little bit and it gets it unstuck. There we go. I've also got a friend who sews, and she says she's got fat fingers, so she finds this really handy. Rather than having her hands in like this, she uses an awl in this way just to make sure that she can manipulate the fabric where she wants it to go to without using her fingers. Back stitches just to finish that off. Then we can take our piece of work out. Oh, back to our starting threads. Let's take those off too, we don't need those. Cut those nice and neat, like that. And there we have it. It's not my neatest top stitching, folks, I have to say, but I've done it in a contrasting thread, whereas I might do it in a coordinating one. But all it does is just hold it nice and flat for you and look decorative. So make sure that you're happy with how that's looking. And then we'll fit it onto our Luna and I'll show you how to tie the knot. Okay, so here we have our Luna and here we have our head wrap. So first thing I'm going to do is just place the head wrap just against the back of her head like that, just so that it just covers the edge of her ears, and just hold it in place as you turn her around to the front. Okay, and then we're going to do a wreath knot. Now it's left over right and under, and then the right goes over the left and then under. And that gives you a nice little knot where the two ends come out quite nicely on the edge there. And you can just play around with that and just get it sitting however you want it to. Just tidy it up a little bit. But there we go, there's Luna in her new little head wrap, sitting nice and neatly against the back of her head there. Hopefully yours does too. And there we go, folks. So there we go, Luna's little head wrap, all nice and finished for her. You could do this in the same colour, you could do each side a different colour if you wanted for two different looks, then it could be reversible. That's all doable. And as I say, if you just need to adjust for the sizing of your pattern, then feel free to go ahead and do that. As I say, to anybody who's enjoyed this, and if you're going to download the pattern, please do consider subscribing. I'd be really, really grateful. As I say, hoping to make that 1,000. We're about 700, I think, at the moment on the subscribers. So I know it's a tall order in a month, but you never know, miracles do happen sometimes. And hopefully you'll enjoy your Luna wearing this new addition to her wardrobe. I'm off to finish the shirt that you can see behind your corner. It's my husband's shirt. He wants one in linen, so this is the 12 that I'm just making. So we're having a go at that, and I told him it was essential that I spoke to you all today and to get the head wrap done. So he's given me a stay of not execution, that's the wrong word, but yeah, he's happy enough that we're doing this little thing for Luna today for all of you. So but now I really must get on with his shirt. So have a great day, everybody. Happy stitching. Have a lovely day wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos. See you all soon.